5 seconds. He's going to throw it. Howard leaps. He has it. Touchdown. Carolina back from the dead to tie the game with 2 seconds to go. Snap back, spot down. The kick is cleanly away. It is good!
And
Nick
it's
Weiler with a
Yes, sir.
54-yard field goal. And how about them Tar Heels? They do it!
Here's Kupak. Gives off to Amos. He's got it! He's Unbelievable! Unreal!
Jordan back to kick. It's blocked again. Picked up. It'll be a touchdown, Carolina, for Bracy Walker. He blocks his second punt and scores his second touchdown of the season. It's 14-13. Mr. Jordan beat Mr. Walker. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
This is the Heel Tough Blog Podcast on Spreaker.com. We welcome in from ESPN. He covers the ACC in depth. He's been doing it for years, and he's one of the best. It's David Hale, who's back with us. And David, since the last time that we talked to you, you have changed your profile picture. You have easily one of the most interesting profile picture, things that goes on each year where you change it. How did you come up with this year's, which is the Mustachio George Costanza from Seinfeld?
So last year around NCAA tournament time, I thought it'd be fun to just put out a bunch of potential avatars and let people vote. And so I did it again this year. Honestly, I don't know if I'll keep doing it. I feel like the fans don't know what they don't know what they want. They're off in left field. I've had 2 years in a row. I thought I had a Wilford Brimley potential avatar, and I was like, this is the one, man. Yeah. Wilford Brimley. He's eating oatmeal. That's the one. Yeah. And it doesn't win. And I think these millennials, they're ruining my avatar. I'm gonna go back to making my own decisions.
Well, there you go. That would be a good one.
Democracy doesn't work, is what I'm trying to say.
There it is. You got to put a foot down and get that Wilford Brimley eating oatmeal up there. That's what you got to do. But let's get in and talk a little bit of Tar Heel football with you. And it's just focusing on that article that you wrote about Mack Brown coming back to North Carolina. And I don't think that you could have picked a better title, because it's kind of what we were all thinking is, can Mack Brown still run a program? He's been on TV. He's actually, been on ESPN for, he was there for 5 years. But he says that he learned a lot just watching some of these modern day offenses, some of these, what everybody's doing out there. So, first of all, I want to get your opinion when the hire was first made and your opinion now. Has it changed from when the Carolina first made the hire to now with everything that he's done on the recruiting trail, or has it stayed the same?
So I was kind of aware that this was the likely hire fairly early on, well before that Fedora had been announced that they were making a change. Mm-hmm. And my first thought was, no, my sources on this are wrong. There's just no way this is happening, because it seemed so ludicrous an idea. That was really that was my first impression. This is grasping at straws. This is trying to rekindle a past that really doesn't exist anymore. It is, I think, I thought of it largely as a decision made to placate some boosters and not the thing that was best for Carolina football. I think when you talk to a lot of other people, that was probably not a unique thought. But, the thing of it is, and I knew this from knowing Mack a little bit from his time at ESPN, is that there is just such a gravitas to Mack Brown. There is a way that he engages people that no matter how silly the idea might have seemed, it's hard not to start thinking like, well, Mack's so sure about this, and he's got other people around him that are so sure about it, then maybe I'm the one missing something. And, you go around campus now, and you go around into the football offices, and it is a different feeling. Now, I'm not one to say different feeling translates to more wins. I think, your talent is largely what determines whether you're winning football games or not. But I think there had been just such a black cloud over this program for so long that some of it was caused by Larry, some of it was caused by a lot of unfortunate things that were outside of their control, and some of it was just caused by problems that the university as a whole has gotten itself into. But it seems like it had been a really long time since there was good news and optimism around North Carolina football, but you go into those offices now and you can feel it. I mean, there is an optimism there that was not there. And I think any coach could have come in and sold some level of optimism, but the way that Mack Brown does it is, I think, much more of sort of a top-down way of doing things, and it's not just convincing the players like, hey, here's a fresh start. It's getting everybody to buy in on this idea that, like, we're building something here, right? That things aren't as bad as they've seemed over the last few years, that there is potential, that we can do things, that we do have the answers, that we are willing to push harder to make it happen. And he's really good as a salesman, too, to say, like, hey, here's the goal, here's the dream, here's what I'm trying to sell, here's what I need you to do to make that a reality and convince people to do it. These are the things that Mack Brown is just really, really good at. And he's done it before in a lot of places. And, yeah, the landscape of college football has changed. I think it's still, the jury is out on how well the adjustments will go and how much that Mack has learned over the last 5 years. But look, I mean, if you're gonna roll the dice, why not roll the dice on Mack Brown? He's a guy who is probably a safer bet than a lot of the other options that they might have had. And,
right.
Again, I'm not putting my stamp of approval on it and saying that they're going out and winning 10 games and getting back to an ACC championship game in the next year or two. But I'm much more optimistic about it than I was the day that it happened.
I think that's kind of how everybody feels, and part of the reason is the staff they hired. I mean, we're long away from the days of the pipe dreams that originally came out a couple of days after his hire of Cliff Kingsbury coming and potentially Gene Chizik coming back. But the guys that Carolina does have, Phil Longo, the offensive coordinator, Jay Bateman, the defensive coordinator, and then, you keep Tommy Thigpen, a guy that was there during his time, Mack's time, in the 1980s and early 1990s, and then you bring in some guys like Dre Bly, who a lot of people are really liking right now. He's doing a great job recruiting the Tidewater area and the Charlotte area, and then there were a couple other interesting hires. So, how important was it for him to land a staff as good as the one that he's got in place? Because, I mean, if you look at it right now, this staff has to be one of the top 3 in the ACC just on paper, right?
Yeah, and what's really stands out about the staff that he's put together is that it's not a recruiting staff and it's not a X's and O's staff. It's really a good mix of the two. I think both coordinators that he hired are just really top-notch, get the most out of your guys, scheme your way to wins, smart X's and O's coaches. And he surrounded them with a lot of guys, as you say, whether it's Dre Bly going into an area where Carolina needed a boost, or Tim Brewster kind of getting back to the roots and really, talking up the game of recruiting in North Carolina, or Tommy Thigpen, who kind of knows the ropes and has been around doing it a while, as the transition guy. They've got guys that can recruit, and they've got guys that can coach. And it's a really hard job to kind of get that mix. And I think you see too many coaches come into a program like UNC where the recruiting has fallen off and say, our job is to fill this staff with guys who are going to go out and sign talent. And you need a few of those, but you also need guys who are going to develop that talent once they're on campus, and I think he's got that too. That's a hard mix to find, and I think they're in good shape with it.
Now, I noticed that in the article, and this is something that's been mentioned many times, is that Mack isn't necessarily the first to do it. Now, as you mentioned, he is the oldest to come back to his old school, primarily a Power 5 program. And, no one was really away from the game as long as he was. But, I mean, when you look at names like Bill Schneider, Bill Walsh, and Bobby Petrino, I don't think that, it's really a terrible thing. I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of where Carolina is now to where those programs were or currently are, with Bill Schneider just leaving this past year, it looks like those programs are still are still in relatively decent shape. So, I mean, from that perspective, is it really the worst thing if Mack Brown comes back to Carolina and really we'll just focus on Bill Schneider and gets them to a point where Bill Schneider had Kansas State when he returned the second time?
I mean, it's a good question. What is the expectation here, right? I mean, I think, this is always sort of the thing with Carolina football, in that there's potential, there's expectation, and there's reality. And those three things so very rarely seem to line up for North Carolina football. I think, if you look and say, all right, what if Mack is here for 4 years, he steadies what had been a sinking ship, he gets things back on the right trajectory, and he hands the job off to the next coach, younger guy, enthusiastic, with some level of certainty and a foundation built. Is that meeting expectations for what this hire was? I would argue absolutely, considering where Carolina has been. Is the expectation that Mack Brown is going to win an ACC championship in the next 3 to 4 to 5 years and is going to have Carolina a perennial, top 20 program, which is more or less where Carolina was the year he left to go to Texas? I think that's probably a lot to ask. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I think it's probably a lot to ask. If it turns out Mark Richt at Miami is maybe a good corollary there. Obviously, Mark Richt is a Miami guy who played there. He had not coached there, but you brought in a guy who was, the older guy as opposed to going the younger route, the experienced guy as opposed to going the hot name route. And, I think Mark Richt steadied a ship at Miami, but didn't exactly leave it in great shape when he left either. There was a lot of sort of holes that had to be plugged by what Mark Richt left Miami at. If that's what Mack Brown leaves Carolina with, I don't know. Then it's, maybe a mixed bag. I don't know what the answer would be. I just, the upside though, if you're Carolina, is I don't think things can get worse. You're not spending a ton of money on Mack Brown. Right. You're getting the insight and advice of Mack Brown. You're getting enthusiasm around the program that wasn't there. And I think, worst case scenario is 3 years from now, Mack decides, all right, I am done doing this, and walks away sort of the same way that Mark Richt does, but with more talent on the roster than there was when he got there.
Right, I agree. I think that's exactly where people's expectations should be, as long as he is able to basically, dress this job up a little bit, make it look a little more attractive for the next time that it is on the market. Because let's be really honest, I don't know, maybe what you were hearing, but from what we could see on the outside, it really didn't look like the greatest job. I think there were a lot of people at Carolina that thought that this job looked a little more attractive than it actually was, especially where Larry Fedora left the program at. So I think, if you're right, if he's able to get this to a place where, maybe he is able to transition it over to a guy that's on his staff like Jay Bateman, but if he's not, at least get it to a point where, other guys around college football are going to look and say, yeah, I wouldn't mind coaching at Carolina for a few years, even if it is just a stepping stone job. I think that would be something that Carolina fans should be able to get behind extremely quickly and shouldn't hesitate. Now, here's the last question I'll ask you, David. In order to get there, what does year one have to look like? What do you determine as a successful first year for Mack Brown back in Chapel Hill?
I think, this is sort of a hard question to answer in specifics because I don't know that there is a specific. I'd love to say a bowl game would be great, and I don't think that's unreasonable. It's certainly possible. I don't think that that's the most likely outcome, but it's certainly possible. And Carolina, if you look at the numbers from last year, there were a lot of games they weren't far off. There were a lot of games they could have won if not for just some real bad plays and some real bad bounces of the ball along the way. So I don't know that it is as massive a rebuild in the short term as people think. But, you know, you look up the road at Virginia Tech, and there was a similar situation where Justin Fuente came in and took over a program that had more talent on the roster than the wins and losses would dictate, and won immediately. But it almost set a bad standard where now he's trying to actually bring in the talent, his talent, as the older guys left, and it's been a bigger process for them. I think the bigger key is not so much wins and losses for Mack Brown this year as it is what is our identity? Who do we want to be as a football team, as a program, and are all people moving in that same direction? Can you watch us play a game of football and say that's who this team is, that's their identity? They're not just trying to mimic somebody else. They're not just trying to throw stuff at a wall to see what sticks. They're not, coming up with a game plan to win today that is a game plan they're never going to use again down the road. It is a core philosophy of this is North Carolina football. And if that can start being established, and you can see it in how they're recruiting and how they're playing and how guys get in front of a camera and handle themselves in an interview, I think you'll see that's the foundation that they need to build. You start adding in all of the extra layers and stuff after that. But too many coaches, I think, come in and their target is we got to sign a recruiting class that's top 10 or top 15, and we got to win X number of games this year. And really what it comes down to is, what are you building? If you're building a house, if you're building a skyscraper, whatever, you got to figure out what that is, and you got to create the right foundation for it. I think Mack Brown has a very good handle on what it is he wants to build, and then we'll see if the implementation of that foundation really follows suit. If it does, Carolina's in good shape regardless of the wins and losses this year.
Well, yeah, I think that's exactly what everybody would hope for, and I think you're right. You look at some of the coaches around college football. Guy last year that I like to look at is Scott Frost, really just a guy that wants to get something set at Nebraska, and I think, as you can see from most of the preseason media guys, a lot of people think that he can build on it from there. So I don't think anybody at Carolina should, base it. You're right. Setting a win total, I think, is really tough, especially with the schedule that Carolina has. So really just if you start to see some progression later on in the season, especially because a lot of these guys are young that are going to play some of the expanded roles this year, especially on defense, I think at that point many people will be satisfied. Hey, David, thanks for carving out some time, man. I know that it's getting towards that time of season. There's a lot of stuff going on, especially on the recruiting trails, but believe it or not, we are only just about 2 months away from college football season. So thanks for stopping by and giving us a little bit of insight on Mack Brown and what he's going to bring back to Chapel Hill.
Sure thing, man. Good to talk to you.
All right, we'll talk to you down the line, David. You have a good year, and who knows? We'll try to get you on maybe mid-season if Mack Brown is doing a fantastic job and potentially has this team somewhere that we didn't think he might have him.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, man. So that is David Hale of ESPN. He covers the ACC, as we told you guys, and he does a fantastic job of that. We really thank David for stopping by. He's had a busy schedule over the last couple of weeks, so it is fantastic to talk to him. And Mack Brown coming back to Chapel Hill, guys. The energy is back, and believe it or not, yeah, we are closing in. It's currently June 19th, so we are just about 2.5 months. We're under 2.5 months away from the start of the season right here in Charlotte. That's going to be huge. And we got some huge announcements coming up for the Heel Tough blog. That'll be coming out. Not really sure. We'll see. Might preview something here down the line, but we got some really exciting stuff that we're going to be doing this season covering Tar Heel football, so I hope you guys are excited about that. You can head over to HeelToughBlog.com and check out everything that's going on the recruiting trail, where the Tar Heels are on fire. They have landed 3 recruits recruits in the last 4 days in the 2020 class. Go check out the articles on Jaden Chalmers, who committed yesterday, Jefferson Boaz, who committed after the Showtime camp on Saturday, and also 3-star strong side defensive end Sean Martin, who committed on Monday. A trio of those guys there. Also, Dontavius Nash became the first commit in the 2021 class, so make sure you go check out the article on him. Also coming up, we've got the scouting schedule that's coming out. It's the one thing that we do that's just a little bit different than everybody else, and that's the thing that I love to do the best. I go out on the road and watch some of these guys in person most of the time in some of their biggest games of the season and get you a scouting report. We've had plenty throughout the years. We had, I believe it was 3 or 4 on Sam Howell before he even committed to Carolina. Now, it was before he was committed to Florida State, but we had been on him for a while, so we gave you an inside look at what would eventually be the future quarterback of the Tar Heels. So it's definitely an interesting feature. I love doing it every single year, so make sure that you guys are ready and check that out. The only way that you can do that is to make sure that you subscribe to the website. There's a way you can become a member. Make sure you do that. You can also subscribe to the newsletter. And what we're going to start doing is, if you do subscribe to the newsletter and the website, we'll send you every single article that we write. So you'll have the ability to read it and, keep up with everything that's going on with Tar Heel football. We'll also try to do that with all of the podcasts as well that will be coming out throughout the season as we get closer and closer towards college football season. That also reminds me that tomorrow is Phil Steele Day. That's right. Phil Steele, the man that puts together the College Football Bible, will be on to tell us about the 2019 Tar Heels and everything that you need to know. So we're going to talk about the offense, the defense, Mack Brown, Jay Bateman, Phil Longo, what they're going to bring to the table. It's going to be awesome talking to him about everything Tar Heel football in the 2019 season. And we'll even ask him where he has Carolina finishing this upcoming season. So keep an eye out for that podcast as that comes out. Also, make sure you go to the Facebook page and like and follow the Facebook page. We do ask that if you are on there, please do share the articles for us, as we are having some trouble with Facebook right now when it comes to sharing into the groups. That's one of the ways I like to get the stories out to you guys. It's one of the reasons that I believe that Facebook has created a lot of these groups, especially the Tar Heel fans that created the Tar Heel groups. I love being able to get that information out to you guys. So if you guys could share on your timelines into those groups for me to help me out, that would be very, very appreciated. And this is something that I love doing. You guys know that, and I want to be able to share it with you guys and keep you guys up to date on all the latest information around Tar Heel football. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on Spreaker, iTunes, Google Podcast. I think they actually call it Apple Podcast now, so iTunes might be Apple Podcasts. Not really sure. They change things around all the time. You guys know how that works. Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn.com, the TuneIn app, Radio.com has it. So many different places that you can find the podcast. One of the other areas that you can find the podcast is the website. That's where you can keep up with everything Tar Heel football all in one place. www.heeltoughblog.com. That's where you can find everything that you need to know about Tar Heel football. So, once again, want to thank David Hale for joining us. Make sure you guys go check out his stuff on ESPN.com. He does a fantastic job covering the ACC. And make sure that you go to all of those places that we just told you for the Heel Tough blog coverage of Carolina football. So, thank you guys for listening. And as always, go Tar Heels!